Colorado has a lot of high hopes for 2024, but do they have the star power to get them to their hopes and dreams?
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Bulber. Today's episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver who likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. We are also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free. We all love free things wherever you get your podcast. Joining me today for free is Max Chadwick, one of college football's brightest minds from PFF. Max, thank you for joining us. We're talking about star power. Does Colorado have it, and do they have enough of it? Let's talk about it.
Kevin, thanks for having me on, man. I didn't know I was doing this for free, so I might hop off in a second here, man. But no, I appreciate you having me on, man. And yeah, I think they do have some star power. Obviously, namely Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, who, I mean, I know we're all in 2024 draft mode right now, but if you look ahead to the 2025 draft, I mean, you can make a strong argument that both those guys might be top 10 overall picks in the draft. So I'm really excited about that. And I think they have some good receivers outside of that. I think the defense has some intriguing pieces, especially in that secondary outside of Travis Hunter, too, that I'm excited about as well. So, yeah, I think there's certainly some star power, especially at the skill positions, both offensively and defensively, that Colorado has. It's just a matter of, the trenches and whether or not they can do better in that area and to, get better than 4-8 last year.
Okay, so we both consider Shedeur Sanders a star quarterback, right? I would say he's probably
easily,
at worst the third best quarterback in college football next year.
Yes.
You look at kind of the landscape of college football, the Big 12. Colorado's back in the Big 12, if you guys didn't know. And I would say the Big 12 is very much up for grabs, if you will. Like, I would say Utah is going to be good. Arizona, I feel like they still will be good, even though they have the coaching change. And then Kansas State and Oklahoma State are the teams that I would be worried about. Mm-hmm. But I would say Shedeur Sanders is better than those quarterbacks that they all have. So how many wins, I guess I'm asking, do you think a star quarterback is worth?
Oh, a good amount. In a 12-game regular season, I think Shedeur Sanders is probably worth 2 or 3 wins by himself, honestly. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you got to have a good supporting cast around him. But, yeah, he's spectacular, man. I ranked him, and I just finished my top 10 players at every position series for PFF, and I put him number 3, I think. Yeah, 3 for quarterbacks. Behind Carson Beck from Georgia and Dylan Gabriel, who's now at Oregon, transferred from Oklahoma. But yeah, I have Shedeur Sanders right there at number 3. And then I think for NFL prospect-wise, I think it's him and Carson Beck as the 2 best prospects for the 2025 NFL draft. So I'm a huge fan of him. I think he's excellent within a clean pocket. He probably is the best quarterback in a clean pocket in America. The problem is, obviously, the clean pockets were hard to come by for Colorado last year. But if you keep him clean, I think he's an extremely smart player, always knows where to go with the football, really accurate player as well. I love Shedeur Sanders, and I think he's going to be a guy that a lot of NFL teams are going to be excited about next year.
Yeah, Shedeur did not have a clean pocket at all. If you look at his stats, he was actually sacked more this last year than he was in the 2 years prior combined, and he was sacked a lot those first 2 years. Yeah. So he was obviously I talk about it all the time. If the offensive line could just be average this year, I think he will be A-okay. Let's talk about the guy that he's going to be throwing to and the guy that other quarterbacks are going to want to avoid throwing to. Travis Hunter. Obviously, it's a little bit tricky to be like, how many wins is a receiver / defensive back worth? But when it's Travis Hunter, is that someone we could kind of make that argument for? Is he worth a couple wins in and of himself?
Yeah, probably. Honestly, as a number 1 receiver and number 1 corner for a team, I mean, outside of quarterback, I probably argue receiver is the most valuable position in football now with how much he's passed nowadays. And then corner, I mean, the flip side of that is basically one of the most valuable defensive positions, if not the most valuable defensive position in today's game, just because of how much teams pass. So, yeah, I think he's a top 5 corner in the country. I think he's a really, really good receiver as well. I do think, some of the, basically running a marathon every game kind of caught up to him sometimes last year. Like, he was burnt a few times. The Stanford game in particular stands out, where Alec Ayumaner, who's a really good receiver, one of my top 10 receivers, I think he had like 7 catches on Travis Hunter for 3 touchdowns or something like that. And Yeah, that was a tough game for him. But I think overall, I mean, his ball skills are obviously fantastic. I think he's a really, really good player. And I think he's a guy that NFL teams are going to be falling in love with for his versatility. And that's why I think he'll be a top 10 probably overall picks, because he can play receiver or, corner at a very high level.
Max, what's your Venmo? Because I've been preaching that Travis Hunter needs to be on sort of a pitch count, if you will. I think realistically the best way is to maximize Travis Hunter. And I've talked about this all the time. People get so upset. I'm like, you either alternate series, so he's on offense and then he sits out on offense the next series, or you just kind of go off the vibes, because there were times when he was tired. The Stanford game was a peak example. He had just come off of an injury, and obviously they play in a higher altitude, which he's used to, but Alec Iomanner, who up to that point, I don't think he had 13 catches on the year. He finished the game with 13 catches for like 300 yards, 3 scores, and it was bad. Like, and they were targeting Travis Hunter. It wasn't like Chandler Morris against TCU, where it was like everyone was asking why he kept throwing at Travis Hunter. They were like, keep throwing at Travis Hunter. Like, they picked him apart just that one game, and I think that it was kind of a learning experience for him, because obviously he probably hadn't had many of those games in his career. You talked about the skill positions and sort of like pass rushers. Can you pinpoint a strength that Colorado has outside of these two? Like, let's go beyond Shedeur and Travis, because obviously we know they're all world right now.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, those are the two big ones. And I think, the 2025 draft is going to be basically the Colorado draft in terms of how those guys are going to be picked. But like I said, I think outside of them, I think the skill positions with like Dylan Edwards at running back, I really like what he did in his true freshman campaign. I'm excited what he can do. Omarion Miller, Jimmy Horn Jr., I like them. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Cormani McLean was the number 1 corner out of high school coming out. And I know he didn't really play too much last year. I know he was kind of in Deion's doghouse for a little bit as a true freshman, but I'm expecting some big things for him as a redshirt freshman next year. I love Preston Hodge, the corner from Liberty that transferred in Colorado. I think that's a really, really good get for Deion Sanders in the transfer portal. So I do like a lot of the stuff that they did in this. And I thought that they got some good players in the transfer portal still. I know, their high school recruiting has kind of been the not great part of this Colorado program right now. And Deion's not really going after it too hard, but I mean, he's getting some good players like Will Shepherd. I really like as well, the receiver from Vanderbilt coming into Colorado. They got some interesting play. Jalen Wester is another guy I like. LaJohntay Wester, I believe they got as well. Yeah, LaJohntay Wester from FAU, really talented receiver. I mean, they have a loaded receiver room next year that I think will be really good for Colorado. I just think, obviously, I think we're going to talk about in a second. I just think the offensive line needs to improve, and hopefully they do that next year.
Yeah, they definitely have a lot of weapons where they need them, and then the offense line, they got some guys, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Before we move on to the next section, I'm going to give you a player, and you're going to give me 1 through 5 stars, 1 being the least amount of star power to 5 being the most amount of star power that you think they could generate. So this hasn't happened yet. So this is all sort of kind of projection, if you will. You talked about Dylan Edwards, but there's a running back in that room that intrigues me a lot, and Alton McCaskill. He was everything that Houston needed at running back 3 years ago in 2021 and has not played a meaningful snap since, but he looks really good in the well-off media videos, Max. So give me Alton McCaskill. I almost said Dylan McCaskill. Alton McCaskill's star power potential, 1 through 5.
Oh, good question. So, yeah, you mentioned in 2021, he was very good. I think he had like around an 80 grade for us that year at Houston. But I think he's a guy that, I think he's a guy that can work really well as a receiver out of the backfield, like Dylan Edwards can actually. He's obviously a big play waiting to happen with his speed at 200 pounds. 1 through 5, I would probably say 3, only because I think Dylan Edwards will be the guy, and I just don't know how much a number 2 back can really become like a superstar for a team. So I will say 3, but I do think there's an opportunity for him to make an impact next year for sure.
Okay, we're going to swing over to the wide receiver room real quick. LaJohntay Wester, he had 108 catches last season at FAU with Daniel Richardson and Casey Thompson throwing him the ball. So he gets a better quarterback. He gets a more pass-friendly offense, even though Tom Herman's pretty pass-friendly. Pat Shermer's going to air that thing out. So let me just make the case real quick. Obviously, Jimmy Horn was kind of like everyone's favorite transfer last season in spring ball. He got his number first. And then Xavier Weaver came along, and I think Xavier Weaver kind of surpassed him as the top non-Travis Hunter receiver. This year, in the well-off media videos, there was one thing that stood out to me because Jimmy's claim to fame was his speed. And so they did like a race of some sorts, and it was like the fastest and slowest player from every position group. And the fastest position or the fastest player from that group was LeJontay Wester. That's who the coaches picked because the coaches picked who went out there. So he's the fastest wide receiver on the team, comes from an offense where he had over 100 catches, and now he has a better quarterback. What is his potential star power?
I think it's really high. I think I would probably put that at like a 4 because, I don't know if he'll become an absolute superstar when you have Travis Hunter competing for targets with in that room. But like I said, they got Will Shepherd too. I really like the Vanderbilt receiver. But I think LeJontay Wester, man, I mean, he is one of the better separators probably in college football. He was open on, at least by our charting, he was open on 85% of his targets last year. So that's 90th percentile for wide receivers. So he is, like I said, he doesn't have great size. He's about 5'11", 170. So he's got to put on a little bit of weight probably when he goes to the NFL. But I think he's a guy that could definitely. We mentioned how putting Travis Hunter on a pitch count. The reason why they didn't really want to do it too much is because they relied on him so much as a receiver and as a defensive back. With a guy like LeJontay Wester and guys like Will Shepherd there as well, and obviously the corners I mentioned before, Preston Hodge and other guy like Cormani McLean. Hopefully those guys can kind of take some of the load off Travis Hunter's shoulders and keep him a little bit fresher. So I think 4. I think LeJontay Wester could definitely, if not be the number 1 receiver for Shedeur Sanders, he could be the number 2 guy right behind Travis Hunter probably.
Okay. And then last guy on offense, because we're an offensive-minded podcast sometimes. Offense is so fun. We love it. But we're going to go to the least offensive, like the position we think about the least. And we're going to swing over to left tackle. They have a 5-star freshman by the name of Jordan Seaton. And obviously, I say this all the time. Great get, huge get for Colorado. But do you want to rely on a true freshman to protect your quarterback's blind side? What is his potential star power? Obviously, don't go in the traditional sense and be like he's a lineman, so no one's going to care. But we'll go in sense of like his impact, if you will, like a Kelvin Banks type impact. Can he have that?
Yeah, I think he can. I think he's a guy that he probably will have to go out there and play immediately. And the good thing about him is that I think he's probably one of the more polished tackles in the 2024 class. I think he's got really good technical ability and pass protection, really good feet as well. So I don't think this is like some of the 5-star tackles you get. Kids are rated 5 stars coming out of high school mainly for their athletic traits, and they need some time, especially offensive linemen, to develop. He's one of the ones where, he's still going to have to develop, obviously, but I don't think he's gotten as big of a curve as other, elite tackle recruits have coming into college right now. So he's going to have to start immediately, even if he was a really raw player. But he's not that raw, I don't think. So I'm expecting some good things year 1 from him. He's going to be struggles out of the gate, obviously, for any true freshman. That's true, especially at offensive tackle, left tackle especially. But I think he's a guy that could pick it up as the year goes on, and maybe not a year 1 superstar, but year down the line, I absolutely could see him becoming a first-round pick down the line. So future-wise, I'll put it at a 5. But this year, I'd probably put like a 3. If you're just looking at 2024, I'd probably say like a 3 for Jordan Seaton.
That's fair. That's fair. So they got some stars all over the field. They obviously have some 5 stars in Shedeur and Travis, and then they got some talent around them. When we come back, we're going to be talking about our biggest concerns about the Buffs in 2024 as they embark on a Big 12 journey. But before we do, we need you to know that this episode of Locked on Buffs is brought to you by the spring cleaning champions Manscaped. This season, make sure to groom your carpets and the drapes with the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Clear out the winter bush with Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 and watch your confidence bloom like the springtime flowers. Embrace the season and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our special offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off, plus free shipping. After using Manscaped, I can finally say I have caught the spring fever. They have everything that you need. They have an LED spotlight to guide you through the darkest winter debris. They can navigate you with confidence in your delicate areas. And you don't have to worry about making a mess because the bad boy is waterproof. So you can do it in the shower, in the bath, or in the ocean. Please don't do it in the ocean, though. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. Nothing like a little spring cleaning in your pants. This episode of Locked on Buffs is also brought to you by our sponsors over at Bettor Together. Bracket busted, but want to stay in the game? Introducing Bettor Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy sports platform where teamwork triumphs talent and you can play with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on a real-time player's stat, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard. So grab a fan and join the daily fantasy sports movement. Bettor Together is the first daily fantasy application. It's the first cooperative daily fantasy application. It provides a sense of camaraderie, enhances the social experience of watching sports. Download Bettor Together and from the App Store and sign up using promo code Locked On for a free $5 entry into any NCAA basketball contest. Play with me in a contest on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I'm going to play tonight. They got some good action tonight, so make sure to go check it out today so you can see what my moves are, and we'll be winning some money, hopefully. Remember the code Locked On because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and who doesn't love free things? Okay, Max. We got Max Chadwick from PFF, by the way. We are talking about Colorado, and we're talking about our biggest concerns because in life, where we have positives, we have concerns. Give me your biggest concern for Colorado right now.
Oh, good question. I think you got to start with the offensive line, but I don't think it's as dire as it was last year. We mentioned Jordan Seaton already, and we'll see how he can do. Tyler Johnson, the Houston interior offensive line, the guard, I thought he's a really good pass protector for Houston, so I think he's going to be that was a really big pickup for Deion Sanders to help protect Shedeur Sanders. They got some other guys in the transfer portal too that I really like as well. But I think that the offensive line is still the one place because that really controls so much of this offense. Is like I said, if you give Shedeur Sanders time, he's going to be an elite football player. But that's the question of whether or not you can give him time. So if you don't give him time, then it could be a long season like it was this past year. But I think with some of the guys they got, like Jordan Seaton, hopefully he could come in immediately and make it a big impact. Tyler Johnson transferring in, I like him as well. And they got some other guys in the transfer portal that I think can make an impact, like Khalil Benson from Indiana. And they got, I'm looking right now, Yakiri Walker from UConn. They got some guys like Justin Mayers from UTEP. There's some guys here that I think could make an impact immediately, but they're going to need to make an impact immediately because I think that is obviously the biggest question mark for this team right now.
I've been harping on two position groups all off season thus far. People are getting sick of it, but I'm going to harp on it until it's fixed. The offense line, I think they got 5 really good plug and play guys. I think they need more depth because I talk about this all the time, and it's the worst part of football. Injuries can happen. You never know, especially in the offensive line. People get rolled up on. Maybe a arm thing happens, break a finger, break a hand. Who knows? But it can happen. So they need to go out and get some more guys in the portal, which they probably will. But the position that I circle the most with like a red pin, then I throw some glitter on it, and then I like highlight it with a yellow highlighter is the linebacker group because they obviously lost Demoy Kennedy recently. That group wasn't very good to begin with. They have Trevor Woods there again, who moved down from safety. They do have Jalen Wester, but if your starting linebackers is like some sort of combination of Trevor Woods, Jalen Wester, and Levante Bentley, you have 2 guys that are smaller than your starting running back, Alton McCaskill, and then you have a guy at Trevor Woods who hasn't really played a lot of linebackers. So it's like we need more. There's got to be more depth there. They did get DJ Lundy from Florida State for like 10 minutes, and then he was like, you know what, I'm going back to Tallahassee. So if you were building your ideal linebacker core, you don't have to give me names, but like give me traits that you think that this unit could use.
Yeah, I think ideal traits obviously are being good in coverage nowadays. That's really important for linebackers. Honestly, though, for this year's Big 12 conference, I might say you got to prioritize run defense because there are some elite running backs coming back to the Big 12 conference next year. Obviously, Ollie Gordon, who was the best running back in America last year from Oklahoma State. You have guys like Devin Neal from Kansas, DJ Giddens from Kansas State, Taj Brooks from Texas Tech. There are other guys that I'm probably missing out right now too. But I think RJ Harvey from UCF, that was one I was thinking of. There's some really good running backs in the Big 12. So linebacker is one of those positions, man, where it's one of the hardest positions probably in football, just because you got to be able to do everything. Like some guys like can say, okay, I'm just going to play the run game really well. I'm going to be a really good pass rusher. And then obviously the defensive back. So like all they really have to worry about is being good in coverage. Linebacker, you got to do everything at a high level or else you're going to be a liability out there pretty much. So I think those are the 3 traits that you got to look for. Obviously it's everything in defense. So it's kind of like a cop out answer. But it's tough. Like, and if you don't have a good linebacking core, there's ways to get around it with a really good pass rush and a really good secondary. But there's times where you can get exposed a little bit, and I think Colorado did on the defensive side of the ball a little bit last year. But we'll see what they can do this year, man. I agree that DJ Lundy thing would have been huge for them. I really liked him at Florida State, but obviously he went back to Tallahassee. But I think that's another area I'm looking at too for Colorado right now.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about the pass rush real quick. Last season it was all right. I think the sack numbers were a little deceiving. I think they got a few, I would say like I don't want to say untimely sacks, but they got like some sacks that didn't really impact the game as much as you would have liked. But this year, they get BJ Green from Arizona State, all Pac-12 type of player. They get Samuel Okunalola, I believe is how you say it. I call him Samuel O because I don't want to butcher his name all the time, from Pitt. They each had 5 sacks apiece. And they got Torian Carter from Arkansas. They bring in Quincy Wiggins from LSU and Quinn Barnes. They bring in a lot of girth on this defensive line. I would say, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, but I'm going to kind of give my worry of concern, or my level of concern. Last season, their defense line, I looked at it and I was like, no one on that line should be, outside of like Jordan Dominic, should be starting. Like, that concern level was at a 10. This year, if everyone's healthy and these guys that come from like LSU, like Quincy Wiggins and Quinn Barnes, they didn't play a lot of LSU and Bama, but they're big. They just need a chance to play. I look at this group and my concern level is at a 5. It's like, I either think they're going to be good or I think there's going to be room for improvement, but they could be good. What would you say? What would your level of concern be for this defensive line? Because they got a lot of depth. They got a lot of girth.
Yeah, I think the interior is a little questionable, but I love BJ Green, dude. I think he is a really, really good player. He actually, a couple years ago, I think he led the nation in pressure rate a couple years ago. So he was a guy that I didn't put in my top 10 edge defenders just because it was a loaded edge position heading into college football next year. But he would definitely be my top 15, honestly. I think he's a really good player. Quincy Wiggins, very highly rated recruit coming out of high school. Like I said, didn't do too much at LSU, but I'm still intrigued by him. So I love the potential that Colorado's got an edge, especially led by BJ Green. I think he's a guy that everyone should know going into next year. Doesn't have a lot of the sack numbers that maybe like that's why he was not a superstar in a lot of people's eyes, but efficiency wise, like he is one of the better pass rushers in college football. So that is one guy why I'm not really too concerned about the D line, because I think BJ Green, as long as he stays healthy, he is an absolute superstar. And that was one of the more underrated gets, I think, in the transfer portal.
Okay. I think both trenches last year, concern level is at a 10. I look at them this year and I'm like, much improved. Give me your level of concern for their trenches this year. Obviously, we know that there is still some things to iron out, but if I tell you that the worst offense line in the country, none of them will be starting again because they were the worst offense line in the country, and one of the weaker defense lines in the country, probably none of them will be starting again. What is your level of concern knowing that these pieces are pretty much fixed as much as they could be right now?
Yeah, I think my level of concern, again, the offensive line is tough because they have a lot of good pieces that I like what they brought in, but it's just about how they mesh together. And offensive line is one of those groups where it's not like receiver. You could have one star that really carries the rest. Like if you have a weakness in the offensive line, like that's going to be exposed. So I'm curious to see what the starting 5 would be for them next year. So my level of concern is still a little high for offensive line, just because, like I said, it matters so much, especially for a guy like Shedeur Sanders, who really needs a clean pocket to thrive. That is so critical. So, it's still a little high for offensive line. Defensive line, I'm curious to see what they do on the interior, but I really love the potential they have at edge. So defensive line's probably a little bit lower in terms of concern level. But, yeah, those are obviously the trenches were the big problem with Colorado last year, and I think that's obviously going to dictate a lot of what they could do this year too.
Yeah, they addressed it, which is all we could ask. So now we just have to see what the product looks like. When we come back, we are going to be talking about how this team improves or how they can improve and what they do need to improve, even though we already kind of harped on it a little bit. There's more things to improve. There's always ways to get better in life, and we're going to talk about how to do that. This episode of Locked on Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The Yukon Huskies can only be described as an Armada. This one seat is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they secured a spot in the Elite Eight and will battle Illinois in the Elite Eight for a chance to play in the Final Four. They're a favorite pick by many to make a run for the championship, and you need to go check out the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Okay, we're going to wrap this episode up quickly here. But first, before we do, we need to talk about how Colorado improves. Obviously, they had a lot of flaws in 2023. Max, if you were to give me like a list of 3 things, just bullet point it, like, okay, improve here, here, and here, what would they be? What would your bullet points be?
I would say, I think it's all about the trench play, man. I think offensive, like getting after the quarterback, getting and defending the run is going to be huge. And then protecting Shedeur Sanders, they have to improve there, obviously. I'm trying to think of what else they can really improve. I think just like in the secondary, just like get more consistent, because I think there were some games where they weren't very consistent last year. I think that's probably the other area too. But man, they have so much potential with some of these highly rated recruits they have coming in that They have a high ceiling if it hits, but obviously a low floor too, which is how unproven a lot of this is. So yeah, this is kind of a boomer bust team heading into next year for sure.
Oh, boomer bust. I like it. Okay, I'll throw one more thing of improvement at you. And I want you to kind of harp on it because it's not really a football aspect, it's a mental aspect. I think anytime they got punched in the mouth, metaphorically, or on the scoreboard last year, they crumbled. They were kind of soft mentally. How do you think they can improve that? Because I do think that's a big part of football and just life in general.
Yeah, I think it did happen a few times last year. I think it was a whole new experience for the entire program last year. So I think another year under their belts, a lot of the same guys would be good for them. So yeah, like I said, I think it was all new for them last year. I'm not really too concerned with that this year. I think Deion will have the guys ready more so this year. But yeah, I think there's that definitely did happen a lot last year. So I think that's something they can definitely improve on. But I don't think I'm too concerned about that aspect heading into next year.
Okay, so we'll call it Kevin and Max's bullet points of improvement. We're going offensive line, defensive line. We're going run game because the run game was pretty much useless, and then we're just going mental toughness. You need it to win games, and you need it to stick around the Big 12 because it's going to get chilly in those November Big 12 games, and you got to be able to endure all the challenges that the Big 12 bring. Max, thank you for joining us over here on Locked On Buffs. We appreciate you for hopping on. Tell the people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, you can find me at pff.com for all my articles. You can follow me on Twitter at Max Chadwick CFB. And then also I host the PFF College Football Show. You can find on YouTube anywhere you get podcast too.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you guys on Monday. Everyone have a great Friday, a great Easter, and we will see you next week.